You don't forget the moment your life implodes. For some people, it's a car crash, a diagnosis, a gunshot. For me, it was a photo. One single, cursed photo. It arrived in a plain white envelope, no return address, no note, just my name in black ink. My assistant slid it onto my desk like it was any other piece of mail. I didn't even open it right away. I was too busy reviewing a case brief, half listening to voicemails, half drinking lukewarm coffee from a paper cup I'd been holding for hours. I didn't expect it to matter. But when I tore the envelope open, when I pulled out the single Polaroid inside, I swear the air left the room. I blinked. Once. Twice. I told myself I was imagining it. I had to be. But no. It was her. Melissa. My wife of 12 years. Greg, the man who stood beside me at my wedding. The godfather of our daughter. My lawyer. My friend. My business partner. His hands were on her hip. Her lips were on his neck. They weren't hiding. They weren't ashamed. They looked happy. Like they were exactly where they wanted to be. I dropped the photo. It landed on my office floor like a bomb. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was stare at the picture that ended my marriage more clearly than any legal document ever could. The worst part? I had just signed the divorce papers. Greg's papers. The ones he'd said would protect me. The ones he'd drafted, to make this easier. I had thanked him for his loyalty. His support. What a goddamn fool I was. I didn't tell anyone. Not at first. I sat there, in my sleek glass-walled corner office, surrounded by success I had worked my entire adult life to build, and I couldn't move. I couldn't cry. I couldn't scream. I just sank. That day I didn't go home. I didn't go to the gym. I didn't go anywhere. I sat in that office until long after the cleaning crew had left. Until the lights in every other office in the building had gone out. Until the city outside was just a blur of yellow streetlights and red brake lights and 1,000 people going about their lives without ever knowing that mine had just shattered. And when I finally did leave, I took the long way home. Drove in circles. No destination. Just movement. I couldn't face the silence of my apartment. Couldn't face the photos still hanging on the walls. Melissa holding our son in the hospital. Melissa on the beach, her hair wet and windblown. Melissa and me dancing in the kitchen. I pulled over and vomited on the side of the road. The next morning, I called Greg. He answered on the second ring. Hey man. What's up? That voice. Calm. Friendly. Familiar. I could hear birds chirping in the background. He was outside. Comfortable. Free. I wanted to destroy him. Instead, I said, I need to talk to you. In person. Now. He hesitated. Is everything okay? No. It's not. Silence. Then, all right. Come by the house. The house. My house. The one I had paid for. The one Melissa now lived in. The one I was paying taxes on while crashing in a rented apartment above a sandwich shop. I almost said no. Almost lost it right then and there. But I needed answers. Or maybe I just needed to see the truth up close. He met me at the door wearing joggers and a Patagonia pullover. His hair was still wet from a shower. He smiled like nothing was wrong. Hey, you okay? He asked, stepping aside. I walked in without a word. The house smelled like her, vanilla and lavender, and that subtle perfume she always wore. Every photo of me had been replaced. Every frame on the wall featured Melissa and the kids, or Melissa and Greg. At the zoo. At a vineyard. At our cabin. My stomach clenched. Greg followed me into the kitchen. Look, if this is about the alimony. I turned and slammed the photo on the counter. His face changed instantly. No more warmth. No confusion. Just a flicker of recognition, followed by something that almost looked like guilt, but not quite. He exhaled through his nose. I was hoping you wouldn't find out like this. You hoped I'd never find out, you mean. I didn't plan for this, okay? He said, suddenly defensive. It just happened. She was lonely. You were never home. Don't. My voice broke through clenched teeth. Don't put this on me. He looked away. You weren't exactly the best husband, man. I saw red. But I didn't hit him. I didn't yell. I just turned and walked out. Because in that moment, I realized something even worse than the betrayal. They didn't care. They never did. That night, I poured myself a drink. Then another. Then 3 more. I stared out the window of my tiny apartment at the city I once thought I'd conquered. And I said the words I never thought I'd say out loud. I lost everything. Before Melissa became her, she was everything. She was laughter echoing down dorm hallways. She was sunrise coffee after all-night cramming. She was handwritten notes slipped into my textbooks, and late-night fries in the back of my beat-up Honda. When I close my eyes, I can still see her sitting cross-legged on the grass outside the student union, her hair braided loosely, a pen between her teeth, sun in her eyes and mine. She was magic. The kind of woman you write novels about. The kind of woman you build futures for. And I did. I built everything for her. We got married the summer after I graduated from law school. It was nothing extravagant, a garden ceremony in her aunt's backyard, string lights, borrowed chairs, and a three-piece band that sounded better drunk than sober. But it was perfect. She wore a dress with lace sleeves, and I swear to God, I didn't blink the entire time she walked toward me. I remember what she whispered to me at the altar. "Let's build something beautiful." We tried. We really did. The first few years were the kind you remember with a soft ache, messy, poor, but real. Melissa worked for a local paper, stringing together freelance articles and chasing small-town corruption with fire in her eyes. I took every case I could at a mid-tier firm, working 80-hour weeks for partners who wouldn't remember my name if I died in their lobby. We didn't have money, but we had meaning. On Sunday nights, we'd make pasta from scratch and drink wine we couldn't afford. We danced barefoot in the kitchen. We made love like we didn't know exhaustion. I thought that was the hardest life would ever get. I was wrong. The year I started my own practice, everything changed. I was 29 and stupidly ambitious. Melissa said she was proud, said I was brilliant, said she believed in me more than I believed in myself. That's when I partnered with Greg. We met at a seminar on litigation strategy. He was quick, clever, charming, someone who could talk a brick wall into giving up state secret. He had connections, family money, and an office downtown he let me share rent-free until we got off the ground. It was good. For a while. The cases came fast, and so did the money. Melissa quit journalism to stay home with our daughter, Clara. 2 years later, our son, Milo, came along. She said she'd go back to work once the kids were older. She never did. Not really. Looking back, I think that's when we began to fade. It was slow, imperceptible, even. Like watching grass grow dull under constant sun. We stopped talking, really talking. Conversations were reduced to logistics, school schedules, grocery lists, tax returns. We had become business partners in a life we no longer lived together. I chalked it up to stress. Parenthood. Hustle. The things every couple faces. I told myself it was a phase. I didn't see that she had already stopped waiting for me to come back. She started spending more time at the firm, saying she needed to get out of the house. She offered to help us with bookkeeping, admin, things she was naturally good at. She and Greg got along. Too well, maybe. But I was too buried in billable hours and court dates to notice or care. Some nights I'd come home and find the kids already in bed, Melissa curled on the couch with a glass of wine and her laptop. When I kissed her hello, she'd smile but not really look at me. We went weeks without touching each other. I blamed exhaustion. She never brought it up. One night, I woke up to find her crying in the bathroom. When I asked what was wrong, she just shook her head. I don't know who I am anymore. I held her, promised things would get better. They didn't. We stopped sleeping in the same bed. I told myself it was temporary. She started taking weekend trips to see her sister, and I didn't ask questions. I started staying later at the office, even when I had no reason to. Work became my refuge. Success became my drug. I thought if I just earned enough, provided enough, became enough, I could fix what was broken between us. But Melissa didn't want things fixed. She wanted out. And I was too blind to see it. I remember the last family photo we took together. It was on Milo's 6th birthday. Balloons, cake, a bouncy house in the backyard. Melissa was wearing that pale yellow sundress I used to love. We stood behind Milo and Clara, arms around each other, smiling for the camera. But if you look closely, if you really look, you'll see it. My hand on her waist, but her body leaning ever so slightly away. My smile wide. Hers tight. Greg was there that day too. He brought a gift for the kids. Stayed long after everyone else had gone. Helped Melissa clean up. Watched her with eyes I didn't recognize back then. And when I went inside to take a call from a client, I left them alone in the kitchen for almost 20 minutes. 20 minutes. That was probably all it took. It's funny how betrayal doesn't always begin with fire. Sometimes it starts with indifference. With silence. With I'm fine when they're not. Sometimes the greatest betrayal isn't the affair, or the lie, or the stolen money. Sometimes it's the moment you stopped noticing they were already gone. The day Melissa told me she wanted a divorce, she didn't cry. She didn't scream or throw anything. She didn't accuse or beg or hesitate. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, where Clara had spilled juice and Milo had drawn superheroes on the underside, and she simply said, "I can't do this anymore." I stared at her, not comprehending. "Not really." "This," I repeated. "This marriage. This life." I waited for the punchline. For the fight. For something. But all I got was a shrug. "I've felt alone for a long time," she said. "You're never home. When you are, you're not really here. And I'm tired of pretending." I wanted to argue, to say I was doing all of this for her. For the kids. For us. But the words stuck in my throat. Because some part of me already knew she wasn't wrong. "I don't hate you," she added. "But I can't love you like this anymore." She got up and walked upstairs. And just like that, it was over. I slept on the couch that night. The next morning, Greg texted me. "Heard about the divorce. I'm here for you, man. Let me help. You don't need more stress." I didn't even think twice. He was my friend, my partner, the man who stood beside me at my wedding. I called him immediately. "Thanks," I said. I don't know where to start." "Let me take care of it," he said. "I'll draft the papers. We'll keep it simple, amicable. You don't need the courts dragging you both through hell." And I agreed. Because I trusted him. Because betrayal only works if you trust the person holding the knife. Over the next few weeks, Melissa was unusually calm. Almost gentle. We divided furniture, discussed custody arrangements, set up a new schedule for the kids. No yelling. No blame. I thought we were being mature. I thought this was what healthy separation looked like. I didn't realize it was just theater, well-rehearsed and expertly directed. Greg handled everything. Met with Melissa, just to clarify some details. Drafted all the documents. He even emailed me a breakdown of the settlement terms. 70-30 assets split in her favor, he explained. "It's just how the courts tend to go when there's primary custody involved. But I've made sure you keep your pension and stock options." I blinked. 70%? "It's cleaner this way," he said, with that smooth voice I'd once admired. "It avoids dragging this out in court. Trust me, this is the best possible outcome." I hesitated. He leaned forward. "I wouldn't let you sign anything that wasn't fair." I signed. 2 days later, I got an alert from the bank. 3 joint accounts were closed. Then came a withdrawal from our investment portfolio, one I didn't authorize. I called Greg in a panic. "Relax," he said. "She's entitled to her share. We'll sort it out." But we never sorted it out. Because by then, I had already signed the release clauses. I had already handed over power of attorney. I had already given them everything they needed. I was no longer her husband. I was her mark. And Greg? He was her accomplice. I didn't know how deep the betrayal went until I ran into a former paralegal from our firm, Jamie. Sweet girl. Smart. Nervous when she pulled me aside at a coffee shop downtown. "I probably shouldn't say anything," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "But I saw them." "Saw who?" "Melissa and Greg. A year ago. Together. In Aspen. They told everyone it was a conference." My throat went dry. "What?" They were holding hands. Kissing. I didn't want to assume, but it wasn't professional. That was the first crack. The second came when I logged into our firm's financial software, something Greg rarely let me do. Accounts had been quietly shifted. Funds reallocated. Bonuses paid under phantom names. Greg had been bleeding me dry for months, maybe longer. And I had been too trusting, too distracted, too stupid to see it. I confronted him. Went to his office unannounced. Marched in without knocking. He looked up from his laptop, annoyed. "Can I help you?" "You're sleeping with my wife." He blinked. Just once. Then leaned back in his chair. "That's your guess." "No. That's my fact." He didn't deny it. Instead, he stood, crossed his arms and said, "She deserves someone who sees her." That hit harder than a punch. Because deep down, some part of me agreed. I walked out of the firm I helped build with nothing but my keys and my shame. The next day, he changed the lock. I wish I could tell you I stood tall. That I fought back. That I burned the whole empire down and rose from the ashes like a damn phoenix. But I didn't. I drank. I missed my court dates. I slept through calls. I ignored my kids. I became the man they accused me of being. And the worst part? It felt easier than facing what I'd lost. One night, I woke up on the floor of my apartment with an empty bottle of bourbon and a voicemail from Clara. "Hi, Daddy. I made a picture at school. Of you. The teacher said to draw our hero. I drew you in a cape. I sat there, in that tiny one-bedroom with no furniture and no future, and I cried harder than I ever had in my life. Because somehow, in the wreckage of everything I'd built, my daughter still saw a hero. And that meant I had to become one again. Rock bottom doesn't announce itself. It doesn't kick down the door or scream in your face. It whispers, quietly, consistently, like a dripping faucet in a dark room. Mine whispered to me every morning when I opened my eyes and couldn't remember how I got to bed. Or if I had even made it to bed. When I stared into the mirror and didn't recognize the man on the other side. He looked older, broken, hollow. He looked like someone I never wanted to become. And yet, there he was, me. The turning point came on a Tuesday. I was sitting on the subway platform, unshaven and hungover, wearing the same shirt I'd slept in. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa. You missed Clara's recital. She cried when you didn't show. No punctuation. No insult. Just cold fact. I didn't respond. Couldn't. I stared at that message for 20 minutes while people came and went, trains roared past, and somewhere deep inside me, something finally snapped, not in anger, but surrender. I was tired of this version of myself. Tired of hiding. Tired of bleeding from wounds I refused to admit existed. So I got up. I didn't go to work. I didn't go home. I walked straight into a community mental health clinic on 87th and Lenox and asked for help. Her name was Lisa. Mid-40s, eyes that had seen more than she ever said, and a way of looking at you like she already knew the parts you were trying to hide. She sat across from me in a small office with peeling wallpaper and a faint smell of lavender. Why are you here? She asked. I laughed. Dry. Bitter. Because I ruined my life. She nodded. And what makes you think it's over? Because my wife left me. Slept with my best friend. Took everything. I've lost my kids, my business, my money. She held up a hand. Let's start with this. What part did you play in it? I blinked. I didn't cheat, I said. That's not what I asked. It hit like a punch. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Because deep down I knew. Over the weeks I kept coming back. At first, it was to prove her wrong. To defend myself. To rewrite the narrative that painted me as the villain. But slowly, session by session, denial began to crack. I saw it. How I had buried myself in work. How I had measured love in income, presence in paycheck. How I had turned success into a religion and sacrificed my marriage at its altar. Melissa didn't just fall out of love. I disappeared first. No, that didn't excuse her betrayal. What she and Greg did was unforgivable. But it explained the emptiness she'd felt long before she filled it with someone else. And understanding that? That was the first thread I pulled that began to unravel my bitterness. Healing wasn't glamorous. There was no breakthrough montage. No dramatic moment of redemption. There were missed sessions and relapse nights. There were panic attacks and journal pages I had to burn. There were memories I couldn't forget, dreams that woke me in sweat, and days I stared at Clara's drawing like it was a map back to who I used to be. But slowly I got better. I started volunteering at a youth legal clinic, helping kids who reminded me of myself at their age. Angry, unseen, desperate for direction. I joined a men's support group. I deleted Greg's number. I stopped stalking Melissa's social media. And for the first time in years, I sat still, really still, with myself. It was terrifying. But it was also honest. 6 months after my first therapy session, I stood in front of my kids again, clear-eyed, sober, and steady. Clara hugged me like she was afraid I'd disappear again. Milo handed me a Lego robot and said, I made this while you were gone. Now you're back, it's yours. Melissa stood in the doorway, arms crossed, uncertain. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I wasn't there for her anymore. I was there for them. I rebuilt my firm from scratch, just me, a tiny rented space, and 2 brilliant young law grads who reminded me of what it felt like to chase justice instead of billable hours. We didn't make much at first. But I slept better at night. I fought for people who couldn't afford lawyers like Greg. I took cases that mattered, not ones that paid. I started speaking at community events about divorce, betrayal, and surviving public failure. People listened. Because I didn't speak like a man who had won. I spoke like a man who had survived. One night, after a seminar, a woman approached me. She was quiet, mid-30s, soft voice and clear eyes. Said her name was Sarah. I just wanted to thank you, she said. My ex did the same thing. Slept with my best friend. I thought I was the only one. You're not, I said. She smiled. You talk like someone who actually lived it. I shrugged. Because I did. She handed me a card. If you ever want to talk. As friends. I held on to that card for 3 weeks before calling. But when I did, I realized something shocking. I didn't feel broken anymore. Just new. Different. Maybe even ready. It was a spring morning when I saw her again. Melissa. Nearly 2 years after the divorce, I ran into her at a cafe on the Upper West Side. I was standing in line behind a woman with a familiar figure, coat draped over her arm, hair pulled into the same loose bun she used to wear when she was writing. She turned around. We both froze. Time folded in on itself. Hi, she said softly. Hey. For a few long seconds we just stood there, two people with enough shared history to fill volumes, but nothing left to say. Then she gestured to a small table by the window. Do you have a minute? I nodded. She didn't look like the woman who destroyed me. She looked tired. Smaller somehow. Like life hadn't gone quite the way she imagined it would. There was no ring on her finger. Greg? I asked. She gave a hollow laugh. It didn't last. He wasn't who I thought he was. I didn't say, I told you so. I didn't need to. I wanted to apologize, she continued, eyes fixed on her coffee. Not just for what I did, but for how I made you feel small. Invisible. I was angry at you for not being present, but I never told you what I needed. I just drifted. And then I got pulled into something I convinced myself was love. She looked up at me then. But it wasn't. It was escape. And I paid for it. I studied her face. I'd spent years dreaming about this conversation, imagining her tears, her regret. I thought it would make me feel powerful. It didn't. It just made me feel free. I wasn't the husband you deserved, I said. But I also didn't deserve to be betrayed. She nodded. I know. We sat in silence for a moment. And then I stood up. I forgive you, I said. Her eyes welled up. You do? I do. But that doesn't mean we go backward. It just means I'm not carrying it anymore. Then I left. And for the first time since all of it began, I didn't feel a weight behind me. I felt light. Sarah and I had been seeing each other for a few months by then. Slowly, carefully, honestly. She was different. She didn't need me to impress her. Didn't need success or status. Just presence. Just truth. We took long walks through the park. Talked about life, pain, parenting, regret, hope. She never asked for details about my past unless I offered them. And when I did, she never judged. She listened with those quiet eyes that said, "You're safe here." One night, we sat on the fire escape outside her apartment, passing a bottle of wine back and forth under the city sky. She turned to me and asked, "Do you still love her?" It didn't sting. Not like I thought it would. I thought about it. And then I said, no. I don't think I ever fully did. I loved the version of her that loved me back. But the real her? The one who was broken, too? I never took time to understand her. I only tried to fix her. Sarah nodded. Do you love you now? She asked, softer. That one took longer. But eventually I answered. I'm learning to. She reached for my hand and squeezed it. That's enough. And it was. 6 months later, my firm won a major civil rights case for a local family being wrongfully evicted. The win wasn't just a career milestone, it was a spiritual one. Because we didn't just win money. We gave a family their home back. I walked out of the courthouse to cheers, reporters, even a few old colleagues from my former firm. And in that crowd, I saw Greg. He was thinner, older. Standing in the back, watching, jaw tight. We locked eyes for just a second. I didn't flinch. I didn't smirk. I just nodded. Because I wasn't standing in front of him anymore as the man he destroyed. I was standing there as the man who rebuilt himself. And I could tell from the way he looked away. That was punishment enough. Clara turned 10 that spring. Milo was 8. We had dinner together that night, me, them, and Sarah. She baked a cake with their help, and we all sang happy birthday off-key and way too loud. Clara pulled me aside afterward, cheeks still covered in frosting. Daddy, she whispered. You seem happy now. I am, I said. Was it because of Sarah? I knelt in front of her. Sarah helped. But mostly, it's because I stopped being sad about things I couldn't fix. Clara nodded like she understood more than a child ever should. Then she hugged me. Tight. Long. Like she never wanted to let go. I still have the photo. The one that started it all. It's in a drawer in the back of my desk, creased, faded, forgotten. Not because I want to punish myself. But because it reminds me that destruction isn't the end. It's the beginning. Of something stronger. Of someone better. Of me. 3 years later, I woke up to birdsong. Not traffic. Not silence. Not the dull ache of a hangover. Birdsong. Sarah was already up, humming in the kitchen, the smell of coffee drifting through the open window. Clara and Milo were sleeping upstairs. My weekends with them had grown into something sacred. Uninterrupted. Undistracted. Undeniably real. This was home now. Not just the place. But this. The stillness. The belonging. The peace. My firm was thriving, not massive, not fancy, but rooted in purpose. We focused on housing rights, family law, and restorative justice. People who had been chewed up and spit out by the system now had someone who understood the pain of betrayal, abandonment, and legal manipulation. Not just because I studied it. Because I lived it. We offered sliding scales, pro bono hours, and a small internship program that turned passionate young law students into real advocates. One of them told me, "I want to do what you do, change people's lives." I smiled and told her the truth. You'll try to save people, and some will still fall. But sometimes you'll hand someone their life back, and that'll be enough to keep going. She cried. I didn't. But I felt it. Melissa and I had learned to be civil. Co-parents, not enemies. Respectful, not warm. Her relationship with Greg was long over. He had moved states, last I heard. Disbarred after more ethical complaints stacked up like unpaid parking ticket. She never apologized again. She didn't have to. I forgave her every morning when I looked in the mirror and liked who I saw. That was her final gift, in a way. Not the apology, not the shame. But the loss. She burned my life down. And from the ashes, I built something better. Sarah and I didn't rush into marriage. We didn't need to. We talked about forever, but more often we talked about today, how to show up for each other. How to tell the truth even when it hurt. How to walk through the hard stuff with hands still clasped, not clenched. She wasn't a fairy tale. She was real. Messy. Complex. Human. And loving her didn't feel like a performance, it felt like breathing. One summer afternoon, Clara asked if she could interview me for a school project on resilience. Why me? I asked. Because you lost everything. And then you didn't. That hit harder than she knew. She sat on the porch swing with a notebook and questions that were way too insightful for a 13-year-old. What was the hardest part? She asked. Not becoming bitter, I said. What helped you stop? Letting go of who I thought I was supposed to be. She nodded, scribbling it down. Then she asked, what would you tell someone going through it now? Someone who just found out they lost everything. I looked out at the backyard. The swing set. The dog we adopted last fall. The faint sound of Milo laughing through the screen door. And then I said, pain doesn't mean you're broken. It means something mattered. Don't rush to fix it. Let it shape you. Let it teach you. And then, when you're ready, start again. Not for revenge. Not to prove them wrong. But because you deserve better than what they left behind. She didn't write that one down. She just looked at me. Like she was proud. Sometimes I still dream about the old life. The house I built. The dinners I missed. The man I used to be, desperate, numb, quietly collapsing beneath the weight of his own expectations. And when I wake up, I whisper a quiet thank you. Because he had to die for me to live. I don't tell this story to make people hate Melissa. Or Greg. Or betrayal itself. I tell it because someone, somewhere, is sitting on the floor with a photo in their hand, wondering how the hell it all fell apart. I tell it for them. So they know they're not alone. So they know the end isn't the end. So they know. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is losing everything. Because that's when you finally get to find yourself.